A high-end cafe in downtown Chicago, the clatter of porcelain, the hiss of an espresso machine. Arthur Vance, a CEO whose name meant power, watches his daughter, Chloe. Suddenly she slumps. Her eyes lock open. She is not breathing. 911 is called. Paramedics arrive. They see a seizure. They see an overdose. They see anything but the truth. But Isabella, the waitress wiping down a nearby table, sees something else. She sees a ghost. And in the face of medical expertise and a father's desperate rage, she must do the one thing that doctors, science, and a billion-dollar fortune said was impossible. The Gilded Bean was not a cafe. It was a statement. Located on the ground floor of a glittering skyscraper in Chicago's financial district, it served coffee that cost more than an hour of Isabella Rossi's wages. The air hummed with quiet, ruthless ambition. Men in $1,000 suits whispered about mergers, and women with surgically precise expressions typed silently on glowing laptops. Isabella, draped in the cafe's stiff black apron, was invisible, and she preferred it that way. She was just Bella, the waitress who was quick with a refill and never made eye contact. It was a perfect place to hide from the person she used to be. The clatter of plates, the smell of burnt coffee, and the constant dull ache in her feet were a grounding force, keeping her tethered to the present and away from the jagged memories of her past. At 2 p.m, the lunch rush had subsided, leaving only the permanent residents, the laptop-lit faces, and the hushed, important phone calls. That was when Arthur Vance walked in. Isabella recognized him instantly. Arthur Vance was not just a customer. He was an event. His face was plastered on the covers of business magazines. Vance Industries. He was a titan, a man who moved markets with a single word. He was followed by a young woman, thin and pale, with eyes that seemed too large for her face. This was his daughter, Chloe. They didn't look like father and daughter. They looked like a CEO and a reluctant, fragile intern. They took the corner booth, the one with the best view of the street, and Arthur immediately opened his laptop. "I don't know why you insisted on this, Chloe," Arthur said, his voice a low, impatient rumble. He didn't look up from his screen. "We have a full kitchen staff at home. Dr. Peterson said you need rest, not overpriced caffeine." Chloe sank into the velvet cushions, pulling her cashmere wrap tighter. "I needed to get out. The apartment is suffocating." "The apartment is secure. It's safe. It's empty," she whispered. Isabella approached the table, her notepad in hand. "Welcome to the Gilded Bean. Can I start you with some water?" Arthur Vance waved a hand dismissively, his eyes still locked on his screen. "Just coffee, black, and she'll have whatever. A tea. Chamomile." "I'd like an iced latte, actually," Chloe said, her voice quiet but firm. "With oat milk and vanilla." Arthur's head snapped up. "You don't need the sugar or the caffeine. Just get her the tea." Chloe's face flushed. She looked at Isabella, her eyes pleading for a moment. Then she just nodded, defeated. "The tea is fine." Isabella felt a familiar, bitter tang in her throat. She nodded curtly. "1 black coffee, 1 chamomile tea." As she walked away, she heard their argument resume, a quiet, tense volley of words. "You treat me like I'm made of glass, Dad." "You are glass, Chloe. After the incident in Boston. It was one panic attack. It was a complete breakdown. We have the gala tonight. You need to be stable. You represent this family." Isabella busied herself at the espresso machine, trying to block out the sterile cruelty of the conversation. She prepared the drinks, her movements automatic. When she returned, the argument had ceased. Arthur was typing furiously, and Chloe was staring out the window, her expression hollow. Isabella placed the cups on the table. "Your black coffee, sir," And your chamomile tea. Arthur grunted. Chloe didn't move. Isabella turned to leave, and it happened. It was not dramatic. There was no crash of glass or a scream. There was only a sound, a small, soft sigh. Isabella turned back. Chloe Vance had slumped sideways in the booth, her head resting against the partition. Her eyes were wide open, fixed on a point just past Isabella's shoulder. "Chloe," Arthur said, annoyed, "stop being dramatic." But Isabella saw it. It was the detail that everyone else, in the seconds that followed, would miss. Chloe's eyes were not vacant. They were locked. Her breathing hadn't just become shallow, it had stopped. "Sir," Isabella said, her voice suddenly sharp, cutting through the cafe's hum. Arthur looked up, irritation flashing in his eyes. "What?" "She's not breathing." Arthur stared at his daughter. The color drained from his face. "Chloe. Chloe." He shook her shoulder. She didn't respond. Her skin, already pale, was taking on a greyish, waxy sheen. The cafe erupted. A woman in the corner screamed. Someone else yelled, "Call 911!" Arthur fumbled for his phone. His hands, usually so steady on the levers of industry, were now clumsy, trembling. "She's having a seizure!" he yelled at the 911 operator. Isabella moved instantly. She didn't think, she reacted. She slid into the booth opposite Chloe, pushing the laptop aside. She grabbed Chloe's wrist, her fingers pressing hard against the radial artery. There was a pulse, faint but fast, thready. "Sir, we need to get her on the floor," Isabella commanded. "Who the hell are you?" Arthur snapped, his panic turning to rage. "I'm trying to help. We need to get her flat." Together, they awkwardly maneuvered Chloe's limp body from the booth onto the plush carpet. "Clear her airway!" someone shouted. Isabella tilted Chloe's head back, but her jaw was rigid, clamped shut, and her eyes, they were still open, perfectly still, pupils fixed and dilated. "She's not seizing," Isabella said, more to herself than to Arthur. "Not a grand mal. This is something else." She looked closer, brushing Chloe's hair back from her face. She saw a tiny, almost imperceptible flutter in her left eyelid. A rhythmic flick-flick-flick. It was a sign, a horrifying, obscure sign that Isabella had prayed she would never see again. Arthur was kneeling beside her, shouting into his phone. "Yes, Arthur Vance. My daughter, Chloe Vance. She's collapsed. Send everyone. I have the best doctors in the city on standby." Isabella ignored him. She ignored the stares of the other patrons. She ignored the manager, who was running over, wringing his hands. She only saw the ghost. She saw her little brother, Leo, lying in a hospital bed 7 years ago, his eyes locked in exactly the same way. The sirens wailed in the distance, drawing closer. But Isabella knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that the people who were coming, the paramedics and the doctors, were going to be looking for the wrong thing. They were going to run the standard protocols, and the standard protocols she knew would kill her. The paramedics, Tom and Sarah, burst through the door of the Gilded Bean less than 4 minutes later, their heavy boots silencing the panicked murmurs. They moved with the efficient, practiced choreography of people who navigated chaos for a living. "Everyone back! Give us room!" Tom commanded, dropping a heavy red trauma bag and an oxygen tank beside Chloe's body. Arthur Vance immediately intercepted him. "I'm her father, Arthur Vance. She just collapsed. She has a history of anxiety, panic attacks." "Okay, sir, let us work," Sarah said, already cutting open Chloe's silk blouse to attach the EKG pads. "What's her name?" "Chloe. Chloe Vance." Tom shone a penlight into Chloe's fixed eyes. Pupils are blown, non-responsive. He checked her pulse. "Tachycardic. BP is Sarah. I can't get a good reading. It's all over the place. Skin is cool, Clammy. Looks like a possible overdose, Sarah muttered, prepping an IV line. Or a severe seizure. No, Isabella said, her voice too loud. Tom, Sarah, and Arthur all looked at her. Isabella was still kneeling on the other side of Chloe, her hands hovering, useless. "Mom, you need to step back." "Now," Tom said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "You're wrong," Isabella insisted, her heart hammering against her ribs. "It's not an overdose. Look at her eyes. Look at her left eyelid." Tom glanced at the eyelid. The tiny, localized tremor was still there. Flick, flick, flick. "That's just a fasciculation, a muscle twitch," he said, dismissing it. "Probably hypoxic stress." "No," Isabella said, shaking her head. "It's not. It's a focal seizure, but it's not the primary event. It's a symptom. You're treating this like a grand mal seizure or an OD, but it's not. It's neurological, but it's deeper. It's in the brainstem." Sarah paused, the IV needle in her hand. "Who are you?" "She's the waitress," Arthur Vance snapped, his voice cracking with fear and fury. "She works here. Get her out of the way. What are you doing? Give her something. Shock her. Do something." "Sir, we're stabilizing her," Tom said, fitting an oxygen mask over Chloe's face. "Sarah, let's push 2 milligrams of lorazepam. Standard seizure protocol." "Don't!" Isabella screamed, lunging forward. Tom put a firm hand on her chest, shoving her back. "Ma'am, I will have you arrested. Step away." "The lorazepam will make it worse," Isabella pleaded, tears of frustration stinging her eyes. She was back in that hospital room 7 years ago, screaming the same words at doctors who wouldn't listen. "It's not a standard seizure. Benzodiazepines will accelerate the cascade. You'll depress her respiratory drive completely. Please listen to me." "She's already not breathing, Mom. We're bagging her. Now get back." "It's ventricular osmotic locus epilepsy," Isabella said, the words tasting like ash in her mouth, the diagnosis she had hypothesized, researched, and failed to cure. Tom and Sarah just stared at her. "Ventri what?" "That's not a thing." "Mom, you're interfering with a medical emergency." "It is a thing." Isabella's voice was ragged. "It's an incredibly rare sodium channelopathy. It mimics a seizure, but it's an electrical storm in the brainstem. The lorazepam, it will act like gasoline on a fire. You have to check her blood sodium levels. They're probably crashing." Arthur Vance, seeing the paramedics hesitate, exploded. "Are you going to listen to a waitress? My daughter is dying! Do your jobs!" Stung by the accusation, Tom locked eyes with Isabella. "Last warning." He turned to Sarah. "Push the lorazepam, now!" Sarah found the vein and pushed the drug. For 1 second, nothing changed. The EKG beeped its rapid, frantic rhythm. The oxygen bag hissed. Then, the flick-flick-flick of Chloe's eyelid stopped. "See?" Tom said, almost triumphantly. "Focal seizure arrested." "No," Isabella whispered, her eyes wide with horror. "You didn't stop it. You just paralyzed her. Look at the EKG." The rapid beep, beep, beep was suddenly slowing. It descended rapidly. Beep, beep, beep. "She's bradying down," Sarah yelled. "We're losing her pulse." Beep. The line went flat. "She's in V-fib. No, asystole. Starting compressions," Tom yelled, locking his hands on Chloe's chest and beginning the violent, rhythmic pumps. "Sarah, get the monitor. We need to shock her. Get the Lucas device ready for transport." Arthur Vance let out a guttural, animal sound of despair. He looked at Isabella, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. You distracted them. You did this." Isabella stumbled backward, crashing into a table of abandoned coffee cups. The noise was deafening in the sudden, clinical nightmare the cafe had become. She watched, horrified, as they placed the paddles on Chloe's chest. "Clear!" Chloe's body arched off the floor. The monitor blipped, then returned to the flat line. Again! Charging! Clear! Another brutal arch. Nothing. We have to move, Tom said, his face grim. She's not responding. Let's get her in the ambulance. We can work on her en route to Mount Sinai. They loaded Chloe onto the gurney, Tom still performing compressions. Arthur Vance ran after them, grabbing his jacket. He stopped at the door and pointed a trembling finger at Isabella. "You are finished," he hissed. "When this is over, I will destroy you." The ambulance doors slammed shut. The sirens screamed, fading into the city traffic. Isabella was left alone in the wreckage. The other patrons stared at her, some with pity, most with morbid curiosity. Her manager, Mr. Henderson, approached her, his face pale. "Isabella, what on earth did you do?" "I tried to help," she stammered, her body shaking uncontrollably. "You harassed a customer. You interfered with paramedics. You saw the look he gave you?" "That was Arthur Vance." "Do you know what that means?" Isabella looked down at her hands. They were steady. They were the hands of a scientist. They were the hands that had failed her brother. And now, they had failed again. "Isabella, I have no choice," Mr. Henderson said, his voice flat. "You're fired. Clean out your locker. I need you to leave. Now." She didn't argue. She didn't say a word. She walked numbly to the back, her apron stained with a single drop of Chloe's tea, feeling impossibly heavy. She was no longer Bella the waitress. She was Dr. Isabella Rossi, the disgraced researcher. And she had just watched her worst nightmare repeat itself. 7 years earlier. The air at the Kalen Neuroscience Institute didn't smell like coffee. It smelled of ozone, sterile alcohol, and the faint metallic tang of caged lab mice. This was where Dr. Isabella Rossi belonged. At 28, she was the youngest lead researcher in the Institute's history, a prodigy in the obscure world of atypical neuropathies. Her office was a chaotic mess of piled journals, 3D printed brain models, and a whiteboard covered in equations so complex they looked like a different language. Pinned to the center of the board was a photograph, a smiling, gap-toothed boy with unruly black hair, holding a soccer trophy. Her brother, Leo. Leo was her why. Leo, at 13, had been diagnosed with an unspecified seizure disorder. He would have episodes. He wouldn't convulse. He would just stop. His eyes would lock open. His breathing would shallow, and he would be gone, lost to them, for minutes that felt like eternities. The doctors were baffled. They loaded him with anticonvulsants, antipsychotics, and antidepressants. With every new prescription, a little more of the bright, laughing boy disappeared, replaced by a dull, sedated shadow. Isabella, then just a PhD candidate, had thrown her entire academic weight into his case. She slept in the hospital library. She ran his blood work herself. She argued with neurologists who had decades of experience. "You're treating the symptoms, not the cause," she'd insisted to Dr. Markham, the head of pediatric neurology. "The EEG isn't chaotic, it's suppressed. Something is actively shutting his brainstem down." Dr. Markham had patted her hand. "Isabella, you're too close to this. Let us do our jobs. It's refractory epilepsy. These are tragic, but we are managing his quality of life." "He has no quality of life," she'd yelled. She went rogue. She took Leo's genetic samples and ran them through the university's sequencer on her own time. She found it. A tiny, terrifying mutation on a gene responsible for a specific sodium channel in the fourth ventricle of the brainstem. It was a theoretical anomaly. It wasn't supposed to exist in a living human. She called it ventricular osmotic locus epilepsy, or VOLE. Her hypothesis was radical. The channel was defective. misreading the body's sodium levels. When triggered by stress, hormones, or even certain foods, the channel would panic, creating a feedback loop that flooded the brainstem with inhibitory signals, effectively putting the patient into a non-convulsive coma. And the standard treatments, the benzodiazepines like lorazepam, were depressants. They didn't stop the storm. They amplified it, pouring fuel on the fire until the patient's respiratory and cardiac drives simply ceased. She formulated a counterintuitive treatment. Not a depressant, but a precise, controlled stimulant. A highly concentrated hypertonic saline solution administered intravenously to reboot the defective channel, forcing it to recognize the true sodium levels and break the feedback loop. It was dangerous. It was theoretical, and no one would let her try it. You want to flood a child's system with that much sodium? You'll cause a stroke. You'll destroy his kidneys, Dr. Markham had said, appalled. This is not science, Isabella. This is desperation. She needed funding. She needed a lab. She wrote a grant proposal, a 100-page document detailing her research, her hypothesis, and her proposed pathway to a cure. She sent it to every major medical foundation in the country. One by one, the rejections came. Too niche. Lacks sufficient preliminary data. High risk, low probability of return. The final rejection, the one that broke her, came from the largest, most prestigious foundation of all, the Vance Foundation. The letter was cold, corporate, and final. Her project was not commercially viable. She was at her desk, staring at the rejection letter, when her phone rang. It was the hospital. Leo was in intensive care. He'd had another episode, a bad one. She ran. She burst into the room just as his EKG line went flat. "What did you give him?" she screamed. "He was seizing, Dr. Rossi," a young resident said, his face pale. "We gave him 4 milligrams of Ativan." "No." She watched, frozen in horror, as they worked on him. They shocked him. They pumped his chest. They injected him with epinephrine. But it was too late. He was gone. The lorazepam had done exactly what she predicted. It had silenced the storm by silencing the patient. Forever. Her world ended. She didn't just leave the institute. She shattered. She blamed the doctors. She blamed the foundations. Most of all, she blamed herself. Her science was right, but her voice hadn't been loud enough. Her proof wasn't strong enough. She had failed Leo. She packed her life into 2 suitcases, left her PhD to rot, and disappeared. She moved to Chicago, a city where no one knew her name. She took the first job she could find that required nothing of her mind, only her hands. A job where she could be invisible. A waitress. For 7 years, she had successfully buried Dr. Isabella Rossi. She had mastered the art of pouring coffee, of smiling politely, of being no one. Until today. Until Chloe Vance had slumped in the booth, her eyes locking open with the same terrifying stillness. It wasn't a ghost. It was a repetition. The exact same symptoms, the same focal twitch in the eyelid, the same waxy pallor. She had been fired. She was standing in the alley behind the Gilded Bean, the stench of old espresso grounds filling her nostrils. She had been threatened by one of the most powerful men in the world. She should be running. She should be disappearing again. But all she could see was Leo's face, and Chloe's face, and the flat line on the monitor. This time, the doctors hadn't just made a mistake. They had been told not to. She had warned them. She had given them the diagnosis. Viol. It was happening again, but this time was different. This time, she wasn't just a desperate sister. She was the only person on earth who knew what was happening. She looked at her hands, still shaking. "I'm not going to let it happen again," she whispered to the empty alley. She pulled out her phone, her fingers flying across the screen. She still had her old university credentials. Her access to the medical databases had never been revoked. She typed in the password, her old life rushing back to her. She had to get to Mount Sinai. She had to get past Arthur Vance. She had to make them listen. She had failed Leo. She would not fail Chloe. The VIP wing of Mount Sinai Hospital was a world away from the chaotic emergency room. It was on the top floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the park, private suites, and a hushed, carpeted atmosphere that smelled faintly of lemon and money. Arthur Vance did not sit. He paced the private waiting room like a caged panther, his silk tie ripped loose, his jaw clenched. His personal assistant, Evelyn, sat rigidly on a leather sofa, her phone to her ear, managing the fallout. "No comment on Mr. Vance's daughter," Evelyn whispered into the phone. "It was a minor spell. She is resting comfortably. No, I cannot confirm any details." "Stop managing the press!" Arthur roared, making her flinch. "Get Dr. Harrison back in here, now." Dr. Stephen Harrison, the chief of neurology, was the man Arthur Vance had on speed dial. He was, by all accounts, the best. He was tall, silver-haired, and possessed an aura of unshakable calm. But as he entered the waiting room, his calm was visibly fractured. "Arthur, please, sit down," Dr. Harrison said, his voice weary. "Don't tell me to sit down, Stephen. Tell me why my daughter is in a coma. They told me she was in cardiac arrest in the ambulance. They shocked her 3 times. Now she's on a ventilator, and you're telling me nothing." "We're not telling you nothing, Arthur," Dr. Harrison said, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "We're telling you what we know. Her heart is, physically, fine. The cardiac event in the ambulance appears to have been a secondary effect, not the cause. We got her heart restarted, but she hasn't regained consciousness. So it's her brain. What is it? A stroke? An aneurysm? That's the problem," Dr. Harrison said, pulling up a file on his tablet. "We've done a full workup. CT scan is clear. No bleed, no hemorrhage. MRI is clear. No sign of a stroke, no infarct, no tumor." "Then what is it?" Arthur demanded. "Her EEG is baffling." He showed Arthur the screen. It was a mess of chaotic, high-amplitude spikes, but they weren't originating from the cortex, where most seizures lived. They seemed to be coming from somewhere deep, somewhere primitive. "It's like a massive electrical storm, but we can't find the source. We've given her a cocktail of our strongest anticonvulsants, but nothing is touching it. It's like her brain is stuck." "The Waitress," Arthur said suddenly, his eyes narrowing. Dr. Harrison looked confused. "What?" "The police are taking her statement." "No, the waitress at the Café. She was yelling. She said not to give Chloe the lorazepam. She said it would make it worse. And it did. She coded right after they gave it to her." Dr. Harrison sighed. "Arthur, that is a classic logical fallacy. Post hoc ergo propter hoc. After this, therefore, because of this. The drug didn't cause the cardiac arrest. The condition caused it. The waitress was a hysterical civilian. The paramedics did exactly what they were trained to do." "She said a name," Arthur pressed, pacing again. "A diagnosis. Something VOL. VOL. Something like that." Dr. Harrison's brow furrowed. "VOL. I've never heard of it. It sounds like nonsense. Some acronym she picked up on the internet." "Arthur, we are dealing with science here, not the ramblings of a coffee server. We are running a full metabolic panel and a toxicology screen. It's possible this was a rare poison or a metabolic crash." "And if it's not? What then, Stephen?" Dr. Harrison's confidence faltered for a half-second, but he quickly recovered. "Then we continue to treat the symptoms. We support her breathing. We manage the electrical storm. We wait for her brain to reset itself. Chloe is young. She's strong. We just need to give her body time. Time, Arthur spat. Time is what I don't have. Every second she's in there, she's slipping away. I can feel it. He walked to the window of the suite where Chloe lay. It was a maze of tubes and machines, all beeping in a sterile, terrifying chorus. The ventilator hissed, forcing air into her lungs. The EKG beeped steadily, a rhythm supplied by drugs, not by her. She looked exactly as she had in the cafe, waxy, still, and lost. I want a second opinion, Arthur said. I want the best from Johns Hopkins. Fly them in. I want a team from the Mayo Clinic. Get them on a jet. Arthur, they will tell you the same thing I am, Dr. Harrison said, his patience thinning. We are doing everything that modern medicine allows. Then modern medicine isn't good enough. The stalemate was absolute. The best doctors in the world, backed by a billionaire's resources, were completely, utterly powerless. They were throwing millions of dollars of technology at a problem they couldn't even define. They were testing for poisons, for rare viruses, for genetic markers, but they were not testing for viola. Because, as Dr. Harrison had said, it wasn't a thing. It was nonsense. Down in the ICU, Chloe Vance's body temperature began to drop. The electrical storm in her brain stem was winning, and the high-powered anticonvulsants, just as Isabella had predicted, were not dousing the flames. They were systematically shutting down the rest of the house, room by room. The doctors had a word for her condition now, refractory status epilepticus, of unknown origin. It was a fancy way of saying they had no idea what was wrong, and everything they were doing was failing. They gave her 24 hours. Isabella was not in a high-tech hospital wing. She was in her tiny, one-bedroom apartment in a less fashionable part of Chicago. The rain lashed against her window. She hadn't been fired. She had simply walked out after the ambulance left, her manager's angry words fading behind her. Her hands had finally stopped shaking. They were now moving with purpose. Her old laptop, a relic from her research days, was open on her cluttered kitchen table. The screen glowed, displaying the Mount Sinai Hospital's internal anonymized case list. Her old credentials, surprisingly, still worked. She found the case. Vance, C22F. Admit, 1432. Diagnosis, refractory status epilepticus, RSERUO. Unknown origin. Her blood ran cold. She clicked deeper, accessing the medication logs. 1435, lorazepam, 14 hours, IV. 1440, cardiac arrest, asystole, CPR initiated. 1448, ROSC, return of spontaneous circulation. 1510, levetiracetam, 3000 mAv. 1530, propofol infusion initiated, induced coma. No, 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 she whispered, her voice hoarse. They're suppressing her. They're burying her. They were treating it like a standard cortical seizure. They were throwing every depressant in the book at her. The propofol would stop the electrical storm, yes, but it wouldn't fix the underlying cause. The second they tried to wake her, the storm would return. Or worse, the combination of VOL and the heavy sedatives would depress her autonomic functions, her breathing, her heart rate, her blood pressure, until she simply stopped. She had to get to them. She grabbed her keys and ran out of the apartment, coatless, into the driving rain. The bus was too slow. A taxi would be too expensive. She ran the 2 miles to the hospital, her sneakers splashing through puddles, her lungs burning. She arrived at the main entrance of Mount Sinai, soaking wet, her hair plastered to her face, looking less like a doctor and more like a drowned rat. She strode past the information desk, heading for the VIP elevators. A large security guard named Frank stepped in her path. His bulk was emphasized by his crisp blue uniform. "Can I help you, ma'am?" "I need to see Dr. Harrison, Chief of Neurology," Isabella said, trying to catch her breath. "Dr. Harrison is in a critical consultation, and this is a secure wing. Are you on the visitor list? No, but then you'll need to wait in the main lobby. You don't understand. It's an emergency. I have information about Chloe Vance, the patient. I'm a consulting doctor. It was a lie, but it felt like the truth. Frank looked at her, his eyes taking in her drenched t-shirt, her running shoes, and her lack of a badge. A doctor. Right. Mom, please step away from the elevator. Please, you have to listen to me. They are killing her. Her raised voice attracted attention. A nurse at the nearby station looked up, alarmed. Frank put his hand on his radio. Mom, I'm going to ask you one more time to lower your voice and return to the main lobby, or I will have you removed for trespassing. Isabella was desperate. She saw a staff-only door behind the security desk. She made a break for it. She dodged around Frank's outstretched arm and slammed her shoulder into the door, bursting through into a sterile hallway. Hey, Code Silver, secure wing! Frank yelled into his radio. Alarms began to chime. Isabella ran. She didn't know where she was going, just following the signs for the surgical and neuro ICU. She took a stairwell, climbing 2 flights at a time, her wet shoes squeaking on the metal. She burst out onto the 10th floor. It was quiet here. The VIP wing. She saw them. Down the hall, Arthur Vance and Dr. Harrison were standing outside a room, looking at a chart, their faces grim. 2 other security guards were already rounding the corner, alerted by Frank's call. Dr. Harrison, Isabella yelled, her voice echoing in the pristine corridor. Arthur Vance looked up. His face, which had been grey with despair, turned a deep, mottled red of pure rage. You, he bellowed. It's her, the waitress. How did you get up here? The guards grabbed Isabella, one on each arm. Their grips were like steel vices. Get her out of my hospital, Arthur roared. I want her arrested. I want a restraining order. Please listen to me. Isabella struggled against the guards, but it was useless. They were dragging her back toward the elevators. Dr. Harrison, the diagnosis is wrong. It's not RSE. It's VOL, ventricular osmotic locus epilepsy. You have to check her sodium. It's a channelopathy. Dr. Harrison just watched her, his expression one of clinical pity. Mom, you are having a psychotic episode. You need help. I don't need help. She needs help, Isabella screamed, her voice cracking. You gave her lorazepam and she coded. Now you have her on propofol. You're treating a fire with gasoline. You are killing her. That's enough, Arthur snarled, stepping forward. You're crazy. You probably did something to her at the cafe, poisoned her. It's the sodium channels, Isabella cried, tears streaming down her face as the guards hauled her into the elevator. It's an ion storm in the brain stem. The depressants are amplifying it. It's not a seizure, it's a shutdown. Ask yourself why the EEG is deepest in the brain stem. Ask yourself. The elevator doors began to slide shut. Dr. Harrison's head tilted. He hadn't told anyone outside the medical team about the origin point of the EEG signals. How could she know that? Wait, Dr. Harrison said, holding up a hand. The guard stopped the door from closing. How did you know where the signals were originating? Dr. Harrison asked, walking slowly toward her. Because it's the only place VOL can originate, Isabella said, breathing hard. It's in the 4th ventricle. It's a mutation. It misreads osmolality. The stress of the argument with her father probably triggered it. Her body thinks it's dehydrated, so it's oh God, I don't have time to explain the science. You have to stop the propofol and give her a hypertonic saline solution, a 20% solution. Now, Dr. Harrison recoiled. 20%? That's insane. That would kill her. It would cause central pontine myelinolysis. It would strip the myelin from her nerves. It's malpractice. It's not malpractice if it's the only thing that works. Isabella shot back. It's the only way to reboot the channel. It's a hard reset. I know it sounds crazy, but it's the only chance she has. Please look at her blood work. Her serum sodium, it's dropping, isn't it? But her urine osmolality is high. She's in PSI-ADH. But it's not PSI-ADH. It's the symptom of VOL. Dr. Harrison was stunned into silence. She was right. He had just gotten the metabolic panel back. Her sodium was dangerously low, and her urine was inappropriately concentrated. They had been about to treat her for PSI-ADH. "Who are you?" Dr. Harrison whispered. "My name is Dr. Isabella Rossi. I was lead researcher at Kalen Neuroscience. My specialty was atypical brainstem channelopathies." Just then, a nurse burst out of Chloe's room. "Doctor! Mr. Vance! She's crashing! The propofol isn't holding her. We're getting bradycardia, and her blood pressure is bottoming out." The game was over. The stalemate was broken. The sterile calm of the ICU suite exploded into controlled panic. Monitors shrieked, their alarms a symphony of critical failure. "She's in P! Pulse electrical activity, but no pulse," the nurse shouted. "Pressure is 40/20 and dropping." "Push a milligram of epi," Dr. Harrison commanded, rushing into the room. Arthur Vance was right behind him, his face a deathly white. "Start compressions. Get the crash cart in here." A team of residents and nurses flooded the room. They ripped the gown away from Chloe's chest, and a nurse began the rhythmic, brutal compressions. "Epi is in. No change, doctor. Still P. Charge to 200. Isabella, released by the stunned guards, stood in the doorway, watching her nightmare unfold for the third time. First Leo, then the cafe, now here. "It won't work," Isabella yelled over the chaos. "Her heart isn't the problem. You're trying to jumpstart a car with a dead engine. The engine is her brainstem." Dr. Harrison ignored her, his focus entirely on the patient. "Push another epi. Get me atropine." "Doctor, we're losing her," the nurse said, her voice tight with fatalism. "There's no response." Arthur Vance turned from his daughter's dying body and looked at Isabella. His eyes were no longer angry. They were hollow, shattered pits of absolute despair. He had lost. His money, his power, his connections, all of it was useless. He was just a father watching his child die. He looked at Dr. Harrison, the best, who was now just frantically pumping a dead girl's chest. Then he looked at the crazy, soaking, wet waitress in the hallway. The one who had been right. The one who knew about the lorazepam. The one who knew about the brain stem. "Do it," Arthur Vance said, his voice a dead monotone. Dr. Harrison paused, his hand hovering over Chloe's chest. "What?" "Arthur, this is not the time. Do what she said," Arthur commanded, his voice rising to a roar. "The saline, the reboot, whatever it is. You are failing. Do it." Dr. Harrison was frozen. This was his entire career, his license, his reputation. What Arthur was asking was not medicine. It was witchcraft. "I will not kill her, Arthur. She's already dead," Arthur bellowed. "You did your best. It failed. Now let her try." Isabella pushed past the residents. She grabbed a central line kit. "I need a 20% hypertonic saline solution. Now, 100 milliliters, and I need a 10cc syringe." The nurses looked at Dr. Harrison. He was pale, shaking. He had crossed a line. He looked at the flat line on the monitor. He looked at Isabella. She wasn't hysterical. She was focused, terrifyingly focused. He gave a sharp, defeated nod. "Get it." A nurse ran to the medication dispensary. "Stop compressions," Isabella ordered. "We can't," the resident said. "There's no pulse. You're pumping blood that her brain can't use. Stop." Reluctantly, the nurse stepped back. The room was suddenly, horribly silent, broken only by the single, monotonous tone of the asystole alarm. The nurse returned with the bag of hypertonic saline. Isabella drew 10 cc into the syringe. This is just the first push. It's a bolus. It has to go in fast through the central line. It has to hit the ventricle receptors hard. She attached the syringe to the port in Chloe's neck. She looked at the monitor. Flat line. She looked at Arthur. He was holding his breath, his eyes squeezed shut. She pushed the plunger. 10 seconds passed. An eternity. The flatline beep continued, unchanged. It didn't work, Dr. Harrison whispered, relief and disappointment warring on his face. Wait, Isabella said. Then a blip, a single ectopic beat on the EKG. Blip, then another. Blip, blip. Sinus bradycardia, a nurse whispered, her eyes wide. Blip, 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 blip. The rhythm was returning. It was slow, then faster. 50 beats per minute. 60, 80. We have a pulse, the nurse yelled, her fingers on Chloe's carotid. A strong pulse. BP is coming up. 80 over 50. 90 over 60. Arthur Vance collapsed against the wall, his legs giving out. Now the rest, Isabella said, her voice shaking for the first time. Drip the remaining 90 ml over the next 10 minutes. We have to raise her serum sodium, but slowly now. We've broken the loop. Dr. Harrison was staring at the monitor, his mouth open. I don't understand. It shouldn't have worked. It's impossible. It's not impossible, Isabella said, her gaze distant. It's just rare. They all watched. And then, the true miracle. Chloe Vance, who had been in a deep, unresponsive coma, groaned. Her eyelids, which had been locked open or sealed shut, fluttered. She coughed. The ventilator tube in her throat was suddenly an irritant. She's breathing, Dr. Harrison stammered. She's breathing against the vent. She's waking up. Arthur rushed to the bedside, grabbing his daughter's hand. Chloe, can you hear me? Daddy's here. Chloe's eyes opened. They were no longer locked. They were confused, hazy from the drugs. But they were hers. She looked at the tubes, at her father, and then at the strange, wet woman standing at the foot of her bed. Her eyes focused on Isabella. Isabella looked at the girl she had pulled back from the brink, and all she could see was the boy she had left behind. Tears finally streamed down her face, silent and hot. She turned and walked out of the room, her job done. Isabella didn't get far. She made it to the now empty VIP waiting room and sank into one of the plush leather chairs, her body finally succumbing to the adrenaline crash. She was exhausted, cold, and utterly empty. She had saved the girl. She had proven herself right. But it didn't bring Leo back. The door swished open. Dr. Harrison entered, followed by Arthur Vance. Dr. Harrison looked like a man who had seen a ghost and was now being forced to have dinner with it. Arthur Vance looked smaller. The arrogance, the power, the rage, it was all gone, stripped away, leaving behind a humbled, shell-shocked man. Isabella didn't look up. Arthur stood in front of her for a full minute before speaking. She's stable, he said, his voice thick. They're extubating her. She's asking what happened. Dr. Harrison told her she had a severe allergic reaction. It wasn't an allergic reaction, Isabella said, her voice flat. And it will happen again. The next time she's under extreme stress, or gets a fever, or even has a strong energy drink. That mutation is in her DNA. She needs to be on a specific medication, one that regulates her sodium channels. And she needs to carry a medical alert bracelet. Dr. Rossi, Dr. Harrison began, his tone formal. What you did there, I've spent my entire life in neurology. I have never seen anything like it. This VOL. I've searched every database. It doesn't exist. There are no papers, no studies. There's one, Isabella said, her voice cold. A grant proposal from 7 years ago, written by me. It detailed the mutation, the mechanism, and the proposed treatment. She looked up, locking eyes with Arthur Vance. "You should know," she said. "You were the one who rejected it." Arthur looked at her, confused. "What? What are you talking about? I don't read grant proposals." "No," Isabella agreed. "You have people for that. But your foundation's name was on the letter. The Vance Foundation." The colour, which had just started to return to Arthur's face, drained away again. He remembered. Vaguely. A massive round of cuts to their medical research division. A new CEO for the foundation who wanted to focus on big-picture diseases, cancer, Alzheimer's, not obscure, commercially unviable projects. "Kalen Institute," Isabella said, her voice quiet but piercing. "A project on atypical brainstem channelopathies. The rejection letter said my research was too niche and lacked a clear path to profitability. I wasn't just researching viol, Mr. Vance. I was trying to cure it. My brother died from it." Arthur Vance finally, truly understood. The weight of his actions, a simple, bureaucratic decision made in a boardroom years ago, crashed down on him. He hadn't just dismissed a waitress in a cafe. He had dismissed the one person in the world who could save his daughter. He had, in his quest for profit, deemed the cure for his own daughter's condition unviable. He tried to speak. No sound came out. He took a step back, his hand on his heart. He looked at Dr. Harrison, who was watching this unfold with dawning horror. "I didn't know," Arthur finally whispered. It was the weakest, most pathetic defense in the world, and he knew it. "Of course you didn't," Isabella said, standing up. She was no longer the invisible waitress. She was no longer the grieving, broken researcher. She was something new. You live in a world where you think the best is something you can buy. You paid for Dr. Harrison, the best neurologist. You stayed in the best hospital wing. But the best was a 28-year-old researcher in a basement lab who needed a $50,000 grant. And you said no. She walked past him, heading for the elevator. "Wait!" Arthur called, his voice desperate. "Please, what can I do? Anything. I'll fund your research. I'll build you a lab. I'll build you an entire institute. Name your price. Please." Isabella stopped, her back to him. She thought about it. She could have everything she ever wanted. The money, the prestige, the revenge. She turned around. "My price," she said, "was my brother's life. It's already been paid." She looked at Dr. Harrison. "Chloe Vance will need a 2.5 mg daily dose of carbamazepine. It's an old-school drug, but it's effective at stabilizing this specific sodium channel. Monitor her serum levels weekly, and get her a therapist. Her panic attacks are probably the aura for a VOL episode. Her father's management of her is likely one of her biggest triggers." She pressed the elevator button. The doors opened. "Dr. Rossi," Arthur Vance said, his voice broken. "Thank you. God, thank you." Isabella stepped into the elevator. "Don't thank me, Mr. Vance. Just listen. The next time a waitress, or a janitor, or anyone you think is beneath you tries to tell you something, just listen." The doors slid shut, leaving Arthur Vance and Dr. Harrison standing alone in the hallway, their entire world view shattered by the impossible, inconvenient truth. Isabella Rossi rode the elevator down, walked out of the hospital, and into the clean, rain-washed Chicago morning, finally free of her ghost. 3 months later, the sun streamed into the Vance penthouse, but the atmosphere was unrecognizable. The usual, oppressive, sterile silence had been replaced by the quiet clinking of cutlery and the murmur of conversation. Arthur Vance sat opposite his daughter, not at the head of a 20-foot dining table, but at a small, sunlit breakfast nook. He was drinking his usual black coffee. Chloe was drinking an iced latte with oat milk and vanilla. "My therapy session yesterday was good," Chloe said, setting her glass down. She idly touched the simple, silver medical alert bracelet on her wrist, now a permanent fixture. "Dr. Evans thinks I'm ready to start applying for the spring semester. Art history. Like I wanted." The old Arthur would have scoffed. He would have pushed for finance, for law, for something useful to the family name. The new Arthur just nodded, a genuine tired smile touching his lips. "Whatever you want, Chloe. Whatever makes you happy. And healthy." He had not been to his office in a month. His days were spent in a different kind of boardroom, overseeing the dissolution of his old foundation and the birth of a new one. On his laptop, open on the counter, was a press release. He was not quoted, and his picture was nowhere to be seen. The headline read, "The Leo Rossi Institute for Atypical Neuropathies opens at Kalen, pledges to fund impossible cases." He had endowed it with an initial $1 billion grant. Dr. Stephen Harrison, his reputation forever altered by his public mea culpa, was on the advisory board. His first act as a board member was to publish a white paper, co-authored with the Institute's new director, titled Ventricular Osmitic Locus Epilepsy, VOLI, a Case Study and Diagnostic Protocol. It was already mandatory reading for first-year medical students. But the Institute's director was not Dr. Isabella Rossi. Isabella had refused Arthur's offer. She had refused the directorship. She had refused the blank check, the fame, and the revenge. She was 2,000 miles away, in a small, community-funded diagnostic clinic in San Diego. She had walked in, presented her credentials, and asked for a job. She was there now, a simple white coat over her clothes, sitting not in a sterile, high-tech lab, but in a warm room with colorful walls. Across from her, a young mother wrung her hands. "The doctors say he's just spacing out," the mother said, her voice trembling. "They say it's just pediatric absence seizures. They want to put him on medication, but it makes him so dull. It's like my little boy is gone. But sometimes I see this." The mother pointed to her son's eye. "This little twitch, right here, just in the corner. Am I crazy?" Isabella leaned forward. The old familiar pain for Leo was still there, a dull ache behind her ribs, but it was no longer a drowning tide. It was a guiding light. She put her hand on the mother's. "You're not crazy," Isabella said, her voice soft, strong, and sure. "Tell me everything. We have time." She smiled, a real smile. "I'm listening." This story is a powerful reminder that heroes are not defined by their uniforms, their job titles, or their bank accounts. A person's worth is not measured by the world's definition of success. The doctor in the expensive suit was baffled, the billionaire was powerless, but the waitress, dismissed and ignored, held the answer. She wasn't just a waitress. She was a brilliant mind, hidden by grief, a warrior forged by loss. She did the impossible because she had already lived through the unthinkable. How many brilliant minds are we ignoring every day? How many waitresses or janitors hold the keys to problems we deem impossible? This story teaches us that arrogance is a blindness, and true wisdom often comes from the quietest voices and the most unexpected places. If this story touched your heart, please like and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And for more real-life drama that makes you think, subscribe to our channel. Your support allows us to keep telling these important stories.